NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/securityweekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs, their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. Security Weekly will be at Hacker Halted in Atlanta, Georgia, October 10th through the 11th. If you're attending and would like to sponsor an interview, please submit on our conference form at securityweekly.com/booking. EC Council is offering our listeners a $100 discount to attend the two-day conference. Use the discount code HH19SW when you register, or go to securityweekly.com/Hacker Halted. Larry, you had an announcement as well.
A quick question for you, Paul. Why did the zombie eat a pirate?
I don't know. I suck at this.
He wanted a change of careers and heard you are what you eat. More importantly, heard you are what you eat. Because you do realize it's National Talk Like a Pirate Day today.
Oh, my God.
Yarr.
I was trying to remember the pirate joke. Maybe in the beginning of the next segment, get your best pirate jokes together, because some of those are really funny. I want to try to remember those.
I've got one. It's a little on the long side. So
all right, next segment.
Yes, next segment.
Let's see. Wes Widner is here with us. He, by day, engineers clouds with CrowdStrike, and he's here today to talk about audio security, specifically with voice assistants. Is that right, Wes?
That's right.
Awesome. It's great to have you here on the show this evening.
Thanks for having me.
So, Wes, tell us, give us a little bit about your background, how you got started in information security and decided to look into audio security.
I've been associated with information with InfoSec for several years now, but I started off at McAfee Global Threat Intelligence and moved on into, currently at CrowdStrike. But the current audio security actually came about. I was looking at, I was part of the wave of people that bought Alexas about 2 years ago. There was like 10 million or so Alexas that were bought around Christmas time. So after distributing like 4 of them around my house, I decided to start looking into how the security of them works. And then more interestingly, not just the box itself, but how the world of audio security looks, like what it means if we're going to move to a voice first world. Like when we go to interact with our computers more through just our voice, what are the different unique threat vectors? So that's where my interest in audio security came from.
Yeah, and I forget what came first or what I implemented first. We had the smart stuff in the home. Smart Things was my first kind of foray into that whole space. And then I think the Alexa technology came pretty shortly thereafter, or maybe I'm not sure exactly how it went in my own implementation. But, one of the first things that I tried, I was like, well, if I have this voice assistant and I have physical security measures in my home,
can I just yell through the window and like unlock my doors?
Yes.
It turned out someone at Amazon thought about that beforehand, and that wasn't the case. But it turns out now she'll actually lock. I say she like she's a person, right? Now she'll actually lock doors, right?
Yeah, the funny thing there is I have Alexas in my kids' rooms, and they both of them used to have smart lights in both their rooms. And so my daughter would tell Alexa to turn the light off for her brothers.
Yes.
And then they would do the same thing for her. And then there was this escalating arms race, even in my own house. So, that's totally valid. There's also research that shows that, at least in the earlier versions of the Alexa model, where you could play back at a very high frequency above the normal human hearing range, and Alexa would pick up on that too, because it's not designed just to limit its input just to the 300 to 3000 hertz range,
which is the human voice. That's very interesting, Wes. Now, I do want to caution people. I'm just going to throw this out here right now. If you have a smart device, one of these assistants, mute it or turn it off
during this
or
segment.
put headphones on during this segment, because I just realized there is no possible way we're not going to be able to say the keywords.
Yeah.
So if you do have those devices, here's your opportunity to turn them off.
Alexa has already been said a bunch of times.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, if you want to keep it from triggering, what you could do is cut out the higher frequency range above 3000 hertz. And that's actually what they do in their newer commercials to keep it from triggering there.
Oh, interesting. That's really interesting.
Interesting.
So I want to go back to the arms race, because I have that in my house as well, because I have my basement lights. That was one of the first things that I did, and my kids loved it, because we've all been kids. Most kids are scared of the dark. Let's be honest, right? Some adults are still scared of the dark. It'd be nice to turn the lights on to the basement before you went down there. Right. Even in addition to the hallway one, you want to turn all the basement lights on. And so that's what my kid, and that was their first kind of thing. But then, of course, as Wes said, kids are playing in the basement, and the other sibling
turns the
lights off on them, and they're all yelling and screaming. Or also what he likes to do is and this may be another area of research that I'm interested in, is with Sonos, right? He'll just start playing like really loud music on the speaker from somewhere else in the house, because I find that, and Alexa works this way too. If you're in earshot of Alexa, you can interact with it. Mm-hmm. The same thing, I believe it's true with Philips Hue and Sonos. If you have the app, you can connect to someone's controller. Now, there's some limiting circumstances in there, but a lot of those systems, you can connect to them because there's no real authentication up to a certain point on these devices, and you can control them. Just like a lot of my smart devices also will listen to multiple masters, right? It can be controlled by Philips Hue, it can be controlled by SmartThings, and all these different things. So we too have the arms race. But I guess my question for you, Wes, along those lines is around authentication. How do we provide some level of authentication in voice control specifically, given that really what we have now is a passcode? I'm like, my son brute forces passcodes unlocks in my house. Let alone if he hears me saying the passcode, that's a dead giveaway, right?
Yeah, that is one of the hardest challenges when it comes to voice assistants. The short answer is we can't do single authentication to a voice app, and I would argue that we can't even, like, from a physics standpoint, we can't do that. The human voice carries about 40 bits of information a second, and that was broken from, computationally for the, DEC encryption or so. It was broken a long time ago. So, like, just the human voice can't carry that much information to be cryptographically sound. You can do some rudimentary voice fingerprinting, and it's based off of something called the Formant Frequencies. So when you say vowels, that's basically or when your mouth and in your diaphragm forms vowels, there's a fundamental frequency, and then there's a resonance that's set up in the air passage. So those resonances are about 3 other Formant frequencies. So between the first 2 is where you can really get a fingerprint for someone's voice. That fundamental frequency is basically either high or low, and that's where you get like the deeper voice for men and a higher voice for women, and then children are even a higher voice than the fundamental frequency for most women. So that's where, like, Alexa now has a mode where it can differentiate certain members of the family. And the way it's doing that is it's taking that fundamental frequency and it's saying, this person speaking to me is on this frequency generally. And that's not always a given because your fundamental frequency shifts and changes over time. But basically in a group or in a room, it can tell there are 4 or 5 people, but it can't really
tell who's who.
Yeah. It can overfit for you at that one time, but it can't fit for you over time. Like there was this great story of a guy who had a unlocking sequence to his house, and then he had a cold, and he can't get into his house because his fundamental frequency shifted up because of the liquid.
I just saw that one too. It was in my memories on Facebook today about the guy who has a home control system, all voice recognition, and the front door unlocks with the voice recognition, and he goes to the dentist, and he gets some cavities filled. And so his mouth is all numb, and he's like, "Open door," and it doesn't open, and it's pouring out.
Now, Wes, did you have a background in audio or some history there, or is this stuff you've learned just for this research project?
No, it's mostly just for this research project. It's one of those things, I guess, diving deeply into stuff. It's how I got into security, too. And it's also, I go to a lot of B-Sides conferences, and one of the fundamental things there is whatever you find, you just dive right into it. That's one of the things I love about the InfoSec community.
Yeah, it's really awesome. What are the other fundamental issues and challenges with security in these voice-controlled systems?
Well, of course, authentication would be the biggest, but I would say related to that is a lot of companies that are rolling out voice printing before it's ready, and then a lot of people just trusting that and thinking that biometric security is reliable as a single-factor authentication and not just as like a fingerprint to unlock your phone that you've already unlocked prior with a PIN code.
Right. Wait, you mean sneakers didn't still deter people from all that? I think we'd be remiss not to talk about sneakers.
Yeah, ironically, the my voice is my password. I found out by doing this research that my own bank actually rolled out voice unlocking for the app for the bank, and then they had to roll it back. So several banks rolled it out. HSBC was one. And on BBC, HSBC had to roll that back because the brother of the guy who invented it came out and unlocked his brother's account just by mimicking his voice. So, so another unique challenge when it comes to voice is there are so many things that we take for granted when it comes to like the automatic processing of our voice. And I know that's not unique to audio, but deep fakes are actually a really interesting.
And so, Wes, before you get in, I actually saw or read about this this week, and I actually sent it to our production team. There was podcast software that I was reading about that it did a couple of things. It could take your podcast file, give you an editor, and it would make a transcription from that. Now, it requires a service. It goes off to the cloud, which I really want to see that technology be able to be done on regular PCs. But in any case, it makes a transcription. One of the features was if you highlighted a sentence or two in the transcription and pushed delete, it would go into the audio file and snip that audio. Oh, yeah. Now, that's just an aside, though, because I thought that was being in podcasting for like 15 years or whatever. Like, that's really cool. The other thing it would do is based on enough collection of someone's voice would allow you to go the other way and go text-to-speech and emulate that person's voice via AI so that you could make them say whatever they wanted to say. And that is pretty scary, actually.
Huh. Yeah, I actually I have a Python utility that'll go in and do like with the transcription and the voice markers, it'll go through and cut out whatever sections you need as well.
Yeah,
it's one of the interesting things about voice is or audio processing in general is that it's still kind of in its infancy when it comes to the utilities that are available on just any given system. That's one of the things that I've learned. But going back to the cloning, voice cloning, there was a story recently about a CEO that got phished over a voice call that came in, and I'm not sure the voice that they cloned, but they were able to get several $100,000 out of him.
Wow!
And I think that was one of the first examples of voice cloning used in a weaponized fashion.
That's crazy. If you think, I mean, but they must have had a program that let them type and then transcribe. It's not like in Sneakers where they had to like take the other guy out to dinner and make him say certain keywords, right?
The irony there is when Sneakers came out, their voice cloning was already a thing. So the Roger Ebert, I believe, lost his voice, and he had so many hours worth of his voice being copied that they were able. There was a company out of the UK, and I forget its name, but they were able to. They called him up and asked him, "Do you want your voice back?" He had like cancer, and his larynx.
Oh, he did have cancer. Yeah.
And so this company called him up and offered it to him, and they were able to basically restore his voice back to him. And they offered the same thing to Stephen Hawking's, but by that time he was already used to the whole electronic voice signature. But I just thought it was weird that like when Sneakers came out, that whole security paradigm was already broken.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting.
So you might also be interested to know that as far as the amount of sample that it takes to clone someone's voice, a Chinese research firm last year put out a paper that it takes about 3.6 seconds of source audio in order to clone someone's voice.
What? That's crazy.
So we're going to rapidly enter a world. I mean, we also have the stat that this year, the number of spam voice calls is going to, eclipsed the number of valid voice calls. So we're rapidly approaching a time where it's very likely that somebody who's calling you is not them, is something else. It's either their voice assistant that's in their own avatar. Lyrebird is a service that you can use today. It's free. You give it samples of your voice for better, for worse, and you can effectively make a voice assistant in your own voice, which you may or may not be able to hook up to Zoom calls and do, interviews like this remotely.
Right.
Wait, who are we talking to right now?
You've made us call everything into question surrounding that.
Another interesting point on that is that Adobe has they have a product called Vocode, and it debuted about 4 years ago. And that was, you know how Photoshop, you can clone a photo and all that, and we're used to Photoshopped images?
Yeah.
Well, Vocode allowed you to do the exact same thing with voice. But then they yanked the product before it ever got to market.
Interesting.
Huh.
And you can still, you can Google it. Vocode is out there, and there's like I think a demo of it, but then the product never showed up. And I can guess at the reason why.
Yeah, it is the deep audio deep fakes, right? Is a thing. Now, have you looked into how you might be able to differentiate between a voice that's being faked and an actual human voice?
Yeah, so there's actually some really interesting research on deep fakes from a video standpoint, but I think the same approaches still work on the human voice. So some of the features that a computer's not going to pick up on is the fact that we need to breathe between breaths, and that we need to like take time to form our consonants and vowels and things like that. So if you look at, interestingly enough, the text-to-speech, eSpeak, for example, if you look at the waveform that comes out of that, it's lacking a whole lot of breath marks. And so a lot of the research now has been to take text-to-speech and humanize it, add that back in. So those markers there, they're out of the phonetic range that you would normally associate with someone's voice. But some of the research I've been doing recently is that we have a lot of built-up processes where we don't have to hear the entire word that someone says. We just hear snippets of it. But there's a lot of other information that's encoded in there that we could use to kind of say this is not a human, or this was something that the waveforms shifted in such a way that a person's diaphragm wouldn't be able to do.
Right.
So that's how like Alexa's able to not be triggered outside of the 300 hertz range, because a human voice just can't do that, just physically can't do that.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting if, like I just said, and in that sentence, and the natural way of speaking is going to be very different if it's perfect every time. And I'm sure variants of that will give us some detection capabilities. No?
Right. Yeah, like the cloning tool in a photoshopped image. You can look at the histogram of the image and say, like, this is way too uniform. It looks like somebody just cloned it.
Yeah.
Same thing with a human voice or with a voice.
Have you looked into the other anything interesting on the other personal voice assistants, such as the one from? Actually, I like the Google one better. I think in general it's more accurate, and I think more useful than Alexa.
Yeah. I I mean, all of them share the same fundamental design where you've got to go voice to text, and then you've got to have something that will do the natural language processing, and then something else that'll do text back to voice, which is effectively the reverse of mapping your text to phonemes. It really depends on the training and then the company behind it. I thought Siri had, some of the best promise. Mm-hmm. And it actually had an entire, I think it was Nuance Communication was the company behind it. And that was the last purchase that Steve Jobs made. And he did it because that, like, you were talking earlier about like the beginnings of, or like the smart home movement. Mm-hmm. The Newton actually had voice to text in it way back in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And so he had this, like, he and Wozniak had this whole thing of, we want to interact with a computer through voice from the very beginning. So, sorry, I forgot where I was going with that.
I think it was Star Trek, right? It's really that's where we're we're going.
Yeah. So on the natural language processing thing that you were mentioning, just ask Ed Scotus. In that he was using
he chose
Siri.
Yeah, he
started,
Siri the best.
He started with Siri, and the natural language processing was because it was amazing. And then they started taking his keywords away, as he would put it.
Yeah.
So then he had to switch.
What do you mean by take his?
So play Frank Sinatra, Siri, play Frank Sinatra, and those types of things like play they took away from him. And then there was some other things like Alexa, turn on the lights or something of the light, or Siri, turn on the lights, which it didn't exist because Apple HomeKit didn't exist.
Oh.
So now he had to read all of the stuff, and it became like, Alexa, lights turn on the. So it was.
Yeah. It's taxonomy.
Exactly.
So the problem when it comes to voice communication, we do this naturally as humans. We parse out the meaning and like we're having a contiguous conversation. That's really hard to teach a computer. So when it comes to like Alexa's a great example. My kids, we used to do the whole Alexa tell me a joke.
Oh, God.
And for the longest time, it would just pick a random joke that it found on the internet. But then I guess Steve or Jimmy Kimmel like bought that keyword or something. And so it started into like nothing but Jimmy Kimmel jokes. And so like, I mean, his jokes are fine for what they are, but you get reminded that you don't own the taxonomy space.
Oh,
so that's really what you're noticing.
I didn't know they did that. So you can buy keywords?
And that's interesting because we do we do tell me a joke just about every night as we're getting ready for bed, which is interesting. It's either tell me a joke, tell me a fact, or we have one game that we play, my wife and I play at bedtime, and no, not like that, on Alexa.
A voice game on Alexa.
It's a trivia game. And it's weird because you can actually tell that they've got they're not updating it, and they've got some coding practice problems because we've answered Y variable something number of questions in certain categories.
Oh, oops.
Whoops.
Yeah. It didn't render the number, so it just spit back the variable. That's pretty funny.
Well, I'm not ashamed to admit the Alexa's told my kids more bedtime stories than I have. And part of that is because it's in their room and they can use that as a legitimate reason to stay awake longer.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that's kind of interesting along those lines is that there's recent research about keyword squatting. So just like you don't own the taxonomy of the language, you also there's a behind the scenes bidding for those different keywords. Like if you say just play me a song, of course, Alexa's going to prioritize Amazon Music. Yeah. Siri is going to prioritize its, whatever else. If you tell it to tell you a joke, that's a little bit more ambiguous. And so there's this arms race of what's going to show up. You know how we have search rankings 1 to 10, whatever else when it comes to a Google search? And so you want to try to poison that if you're an attacker.
Right.
For the voice assistant, it's even easier. You're trying to poison the 0th entry is what a lot of the voice marketeers call it. So there's just one slot that you need to get.
So Wes, what can people do to help protect their voice assistants? Mine again is used largely to turn lights off and things like that. But I think a lot of it, not to answer your question for you, right, but comes down to configuration. Actually, before we get that, what about using it to make calls? Amazon experimented with that, and pretty quickly I turned that off on all my stuff because if it's linked to your account, your contacts are getting synced, and people calling people in my contacts. I was like, I just turned that all off.
Oh, yeah, and then there was the news stories that was just for a couple weeks ago about making voice calls as well. But I'll let Wes.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, that goes into what you were asking, like what we should do to it. You should pay attention to the fact that going back to what we were talking about earlier, you can't really authenticate yourself. So whatever you can do, anyone can do.
Yeah.
And so if you give your device the ability to just buy things, then you should expect that your daughter is going to buy a dollhouse or something like that.
Yep.
It's just going to make that path easy. In fact, just assume that anything it can do, everyone can do. So that's one of the just a security doctrine that we've taken around our house when it comes to the smart devices.
Yes. Now, Wes, how have you dealt with that with your kids?
Oh, they can fight with the lights all day long.
No,
but I'm not
I mean,
it's put it on something.
In terms of ordering stuff, and I guess for everyone, like how do you deal with that?
Oh, I disable that. There's no. In fact, most Alexa users disable shopping. That's one of the. If you look into the quarterly earnings or so for Amazon, they're putting these devices out, and their initial idea was that people would use it to order, and that would be another path for ordering. But people pretty soon found out that that's not how that needs to work. So
so I've left it enabled, and I've done user awareness and training in my house and created rules. Be like, look, if you order something, you got to pay for it, right? I mean, you could always return it or cancel the order as well. There are some other safeguards in there, and I get an email notification if someone purchases something. You get in there quick and take it out.
Alexa, add a 55-gallon drum of water-based lubricant to my shopping cart.
Yes. So then there's the whole shopping list and shopping cart thing. But ordering stuff is pretty powerful. And we've done it through awareness and training because my wife likes that feature. So as long as it's not grossly abused. But so the other option is just turn it off. Like I did with the calling, you just turn it off entirely.
Yep.
Well, there's several options. I mean, we're used to firewalls when it comes to the InfoSec community. So there's a corollary I'd like to synthesize and make it a thing, which I call waterfalling. The whole like turning on the water and everything else back in the 70s and the spy movies and things like that.
And Home Alone.
Yeah.
The Wet Bandits. It's a great movie.
You're basically masking the soundscape around you. So like, I don't know that it's coming through here, but I have an AC that's running, and that's basically providing an additional buffer between my room here and the rest of the house. And the same thing happens with the voice assistants. They're designed to use these long-term these long-range microphones to pick up things that are like 20, 30 feet away, which is great if you want to speak to it from 20, 30 feet away. But what you were talking about earlier is that most of the time you're sitting right next to it. So it shouldn't, we can take it upon ourselves to shape the area that it's in so that it can't hear anything beyond that.
Yeah, so you should be careful placing these outside of your home or
in your car.
Or in your car. Yeah, they do make them for the car.
They do now.
I think that's really...
I love the one in my car. I hate having the dashboards in my car. I like to just yell at it and tell it what I want to hear.
Right.
So another option that is... It's not popular, and I wouldn't really say that it's a commercial option, but there's something called Project Alias that I'm really fond of, which is basically 3D printing and using a Raspberry Pi B that sits on top of your device, and then you can train that device to hear a different wake word than what the device normally has. So the canonical example is telling it alias or Jarvis, and that's the wake word because it'll play it to the device underneath, and then you can go on and do whatever you want to from there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm assuming there's good reason why there's only so many wake words.
Well, the reason for it is because training a model, like the device has to do, it has to detect the sound, it has to run it through the model like continuously to see if you're hitting the wake word, and then it will hand off to the cloud component. So the reason why most of these devices don't have a wide range of wake words is because if you let the user do it, it would be very easy for them to overfit it or underfit it. There's one, so the Project Alias, it's easy to train just background noise into your trigger, which means it triggers all the time. So
I see.
like, it's part of its user experience. They don't want people to screw it up by training it on like wrong things.
And part of
the
it's
other part is
marketing, right?
yeah, a lot of it's marketing.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's
and
great.
I would say the other part is that these devices don't have that much memory. They don't have much computing power at all. All it is really is just a pick into the cloud services behind it.
Right. Right.
That said, I think one of the craziest purchases I've made from the marketing side. You remember when we were on the show and I found that Amazon was
dash
releasing
buttons. No, they got rid of them.
No, was the Alexa controlled microwave.
Oh yeah.
And it was like $60 and it was pre-order. And I'm like, I got to have that shit. And I ordered it when we were on the show and I forgot about it. And it showed up one day. That thing has been a lifesaver.
Really?
Because I was away on a work trip and the microwave in the kitchen blew the fuse. The actual fuse in the microwave. And I was gone. It was the first day I was gone for like a week. So my wife goes to the dining room where that thing is sitting and she puts it on the counter and they used it. And then I come back, fix the microwave. A couple days later, fuse blows again. So we grab the microwave and we plug it in, and something happened that second time that automatically I got a notification that said, you've connected a new device to your Echo. And just say microwave, and it will do things. So now the 6-year-old gets up in the morning, and she goes to the freezer and grabs 2 Eggo waffles and puts them in the toaster. And her thing is to go get the chocolate chips out of the pantry, put some chocolate chips on top of the waffle, and put them in the microwave for 30 seconds and melt them so she can do the whole thing herself. And Alexa, microwave, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And off it goes.
That's pretty cool.
Alexa's a first-class citizen in our house. We use it for all kinds of like task reminders, whatever else. Like last night, waiting for brownies to get done, we had several timers set on that. And then it has some really interesting features like announce movie time or something like that. And it'll do this broad announcement, and it's really cool. So yeah, these devices, I don't think they're going away anytime soon. I think more than anything else, we need to know like what they're capable of, and the fact that so far they have no security on them.
Yeah. So are there other things that people can do, Wes, to help secure this ecosystem?
I'm a big advocate for encouraging people to look into the open source alternatives. There aren't very many at all right now, and I'm trying to get this out there. Like that's after Hacker Halted, I'm going to All Things Open and showing a very rudimentary do-it-yourself system. But you were talking earlier about the transcription services. Mozilla has as their next big moonshot project tackling this voice assistance. Well, not voice assistance, but the models that are behind it that you can use as the building blocks to build it. So yeah, I would encourage people to take a look at that. If nothing else, even if you're not a coder, you can go and lend your voice and help them train a better model, which is why most people gravitate to these other like Alexa, Siri, or Google Voice.
Yeah, I do agree. I want to see it be more open. And one of the interesting things that hits particularly like what we do here in this show, in all of our shows, is I would love to have transcriptions available. This October will be 15 years that we've been doing the show. And right now, today, we produce around 16 to 18 hours worth of content per week. If you do the math, these services, Wes, correct me if I'm wrong, they're like, and Larry, I don't know if you know this too, 7 to 10 cents a minute, or something like that, right? So every time I do the math, like, this is great. We're going to have a transcription. So, like, Google's got an awesome API. It's, Python library.
IBM Watson was the cheapest one last time I priced it.
But it's still anywhere for us between $300 to $5 a week every week moving forward.
$300 to $500.
Oh, yeah.
$500 per week.
Right, because you said $300 to $5.
Oh, sorry, $300 to $500 per week. But then I'm like, I want to go back and do my whole archive. Oh. God, that's a lot. So I don't know if and this is like asking a question on the air, but I would love to have transcriptions available to a certain extent in various capacities for our audience.
Have you heard of Mechanical Turk and Fiverr?
Yeah.
Actually, take a look at Google's or Mozilla's Deep Speech. if you get a chance. It's a pretty decent model. I've had pretty good luck with it. That's what I've switched most of my transcription and just the heart of my my voice assistants to. I was using Sphinx, but it's more researchy and doesn't do that well. But yeah, Mozilla's project is pretty solid.
I think I've seen this one. Okay.
And you can run it entirely locally, and that's another cool thing.
Yeah, that's what. And my other point on that was I want to see this technology be more ubiquitous, so you can do things like this Mozilla Deep Speech project and make it more accessible and open to people to use. Because right now, there's a pretty big cost barrier in a lot of these services, and a lot of limitations that we talked about in the various voice control services.
Yeah, another barrier to entry there is that it takes a lot of computing resource to train up a model.
Yeah. Okay. The training.
I blew through the $300 credit from Google to do training and all that. If by just spinning up one GPU instance and then trying to train off of that, and so yeah, it gets to be prohibitive. So maybe another way to help with this is either have gear or lend that or whatever. I mean, I would hope that businesses would kind of, I don't know, we haven't yet reached the Linux plateau or peak where people want, like, there's a demand that we don't want to use these other services. We'd rather use our own that we create from scratch. But I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at now, is driving advocacy of, these services are great. We do want to use it. We want to interact with our devices in a voice fashion, but it really feels creepy to try to give all this data over. Because I mean, we haven't even gotten into my topic for Hacker Halted.
Yeah, so you're speaking at Hacker Halted, which everyone should attend this talk now, because this was a fascinating discussion, Wes. But now, just kind of give us a tease for your presentation at Hacker Halted.
Yeah, Hacker Halted is all about just the narrow part of what is collected from these devices and what people can learn about that. So it's interesting. Most people know the story of the couple that was, or the family that was talking, and it triggered the calling out sequence. And then somebody got a recording of whatever private conversation was going on. And of course that freaks people out, and rightfully so. But there's a whole lot of other things that are that the voice assistant can tell about you. Yeah,
well, because they're listening all the time, and that's an issue that I'm sure you're going to address in your talk, right? There was a murder case too, right? Where they subpoenaed.
Well, there's been a few murder cases. There's also been sexual assault cases, which is interesting if you think about it from the side of the contractors that are listening to the audio recordings that are sent up, because all of the misfirings, like unintentional wakings, those are sent up, and some team is looking at that and trying to like really narrow down the scope of the model. But when it comes to like sexual assault, they're listening through these and like spot listening to it, and they're trying to figure out, is this assault, or is this just like kinky foreplay or something?
Yeah. Wait, and then next thing you know, wait until parents start naming their kids Siri and Alexa.
Or I have a friend whose wife is named Siri.
But yeah, that's what there's people. There's people I know. One of their daughter's name's Alexa.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's annoying if you got.
Well, then you got to change the wake word to computer.
Yes.
Well, then you have to choose one of the other voice devices. You've just eliminated one that you can't use anywhere near you.
Well, you can't.
No, my other son's name is Google, so when I say, "Hey Google," it wakes up all the time.
Well, you just change the wake word on the Echo to computer.
Yeah. Or Echo.
Yeah.
That's
but that's Google. The other thing.
Because
going back to there's no authentication, which means one of my sons, the oldest one, loves to change the wake word on me all the time, and like is sitting in the corner snickering when I'm like, Alexa, shit, computer, Echo, like, what did you change it to? And he's just like, ha ha
ha. So with the Echo, I love changing it to computer, because then you can do computer, Earl Grey.
Oh, okay.
Earl Grey tea.
And then it orders like a whole shipment in a case on Earl Grey tea.
No. And do you know what it says? I'm sorry, I'm not equipped with that function just yet.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That was another sad
Alexa
thing
does have a good sense of humor, though. I know you're supposed to be talking about your talk right now, but
Wes.
As nerds, we think this is a great topic, Wes. So.
Yeah, no, So Alexa actually used to have a lot better sense of humor when you asked it like a bunch of random questions. You could tell that a lot of nerds programmed it.
Yes.
And they started taking those away. Like
her
7
knowledge
months
of Star Wars is amazing. If you ask her, there was a whole list that I would go through, and it was all like really nerdy humor. And my family would just be looking at me like half like didn't understand what I was. I'm like,
you can tell
42 is the answer to the life universe and everything. They're like, what are you talking about?
Some of those are good, but like, Alexa, what's that smell? I'm sorry, I don't know that. Like, come on, you could at least
have yeah. But why have they taken away some of the humor, Wes? Do you have any insights in your research as to why they did that, or?
No, I mean, it just goes along with the taxonomy is not something you control, and it changes all the time. So it was just whatever the team that owns that decided to delist that as a standard response.
Interesting. So, Wes, you will be speaking at Hacker Halted on October 10th and the 11th. I'll be there. We'll have to share adult beverages together while we're at Hacker Halted. I do have 5 questions for you, Wes. You ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Sure.
3 words to describe yourself.
Curious, interested, serious.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Acid.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Dazed and confused.
You prepped for these questions, didn't you?
No, I heard you ask him.
So there was some prep.
There was some prep. In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Always strike first.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Yep. Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Even though I heard
alive, dead, fictional, or wireless
earlier. Even though I heard you ask this earlier, I still haven't thought of a good answer to this.
It's a tricky one.
This is a hard one.
It is a hard one.
Because do you have the Oedipus complex or not?
Alexa, you can name parents for me.
You can
so
never.
The parents, I would say, just because I've been reading a history book on this recently, Frederick the Warrior, Frederick the First, and whatever his wife was.
There you go.
Oh, all right.
There you go.
Just because, like you were saying, the son of, so it would be interesting to be at that time in history with that wealth and power.
Fantastic. Wes, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back, do the security news for this week. Stay tuned.